All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Amherstburg Freedom Museum's Black History Series presentation titled From Actor to Activist. Today's guest speaker is Anthony Sherwood, who is an award-winning actor, director, producer, playwright, and novelist whose career spans over 40 years in stage, television, and motion pictures. Anthony Sherwood was born in Halifax and is the seventh-generation African Nova Scotian. The performing arts are deeply rooted in Anthony's family tree. His grandmother was Alice White, and she was an accomplished musician and music teacher. His mother was a singer, and his aunt was Portia White, Canada's first famous Black classical singer. Sherwood is an accomplished documentary filmmaker who has received numerous national and international awards. His production company specializes in producing documentary films focusing on social justice and human rights issues, and has traveled around the world producing compelling projects dealing with HIV, AIDS in Africa, landmines in Bosnia and Cambodia, and youth violence in Jamaica. His documentary credits include Knocking on Heaven's Door, Nowhere to Run, and Mozambique, A Land of Hope. Mr. Sherwood has been recognized as a dedicated social activist. In 1982, he formed the Montreal Black Performers Association and is the former national chairman of the March 21 campaign for the Government of Canada, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Racism. He has also worked closely in South Africa with the March 21 campaign and received a letter of congratulations from Nelson Mandela. Anthony Sherwood has produced many projects promoting African Canadian history. His film Honor Before Glory is the story of Canada's one and only all-Black battalion that was formed during World War I. The film won a Gemini Award and the Hollywood Black Film Festival Award in Los Angeles. He has also worked as a consultant for the Government of Canada on a number of projects, including Follow the North Star for the Department of Canadian Heritage, which commemorated the 175th anniversary of the British Imperial Act of 1833, the act to abolish slavery in the British Empire. Recently, Mr. Sherwood wrote, produced, and directed the play The Color of Courage to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. He has also been a guest speaker at many events and learning institutions across North America. Now, this is just a very trimmed version of his bio. I will be sharing his complete bio on our Facebook page and website if you wanted to read the complete version. But this is just a few of the many things that he has done. So today, during the presentation, I just ask that you mute your microphone and turn off your camera while Anthony is speaking. And following his presentation, there will be a Q&A. So just feel free to write your questions in the comments section, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you during the Q&A. And of course, at this point, you're welcome to turn on your cameras. So let's get started, and I will pass things over to Anthony. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Laureen, and thank you for that introduction. It is such a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I want to thank the Amherstburg Freedom Museum for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon and share some of the projects, some of my life as an artist in Canada for over 40 years. I want to, before I start, I wanted to start with a little bit of my own family history, because my own family history has really influenced the type of artist that I am and the type of person that I've become. And with that, I'd like to start sharing my first slide, and I hope everyone can see the first slide. As mentioned in my introduction, I'm a seventh generation African Nova Scotian. I was born in Halifax, so was my mother, and so were my grandparents. We can actually trace our ancestry all the way back to the Black Loyalists of the late 1700s. So we can actually trace our own family tree back to the late 1790s in Nova Scotia. And the Black Loyalists, if you may know, were the Black soldiers who fought for the British in the War of Independence, in the American War of Independence of 1776. When the British Army lost that war, the British Army promised the Black soldiers land in Nova Scotia. And so that's where our ancestry history comes from, the Black Loyalists. And we can trace our family tree all the way back to the 1790s. This is a photo of my mom, who was also born in Halifax. Um, my mother was an amateur singer. She used to sing commercial jingles on the radio in Halifax. And there was always music in our house. I come from a large family, and 6 of the 9 children are in the entertainment business. This is a photo of my mom and some of her sisters in Halifax. This is a photo of my grandmother, Alice White, who was an accomplished musician and music teacher who taught music in Halifax. She also taught her 5 daughters how to play musical instruments. This is a photo of her daughters, and my mom included. And my father is standing with my mother over there, looking like a gangster. This was a photo of all my aunts with their musical instruments entertaining one evening, I suppose. As mentioned, my grandmother was an accomplished musician and music teacher, but she was also a social activist. And she was also a feminist way ahead of her time. During the Second World War, Halifax was the chief naval port for Canada. And ships from all around the world would dock into Halifax during the Second World War. Aboard these ships were many Black sailors. And when these Black sailors arrived in Halifax, they were surprised to see that Halifax at that time was a segregated city. In other words, Black sailors weren't able to go to hotels, restaurants, bars. They were restricted. And this was very hurtful for them. And my grandmother knew this. And so what she did was she opened her home to these Black sailors who had no place to go, and would open her house with food. She would have her 5 daughters entertain them, and they were huge, lavish parties. Some of the parties were so big that even the mayor of Halifax would attend. But these welcoming parties for these Black sailors got to be very expensive. My grandmother was of modest means. She didn't have a lot of money, and these parties became very expensive because she would not only have her daughters entertained, but she would hire musicians and, of course, have all kinds of food. So to help her with some of this welcoming parties was her good friend, Viola Desmond. Now, Viola Desmond, as you know, was a businesswoman at first. She owned her own beauty school for Black women, young Black women. And she was also a social activist who opposed being forced to sit in the balcony of this movie theater. And she fought the government of Nova Scotia over that case. Viola Desmond and my grandmother were good friends because my grandmother's daughters, my aunts, all attended Viola Desmond's beauty school. And they were graduates of her beauty school. As you may know, for Viola Desmond's work as a social activist, her image now appears on the new $10 Canadian bill. My grandmother was very grateful to Viola Desmond for helping her with these welcoming parties for these Black sailors in Halifax during the Second World War. And I strongly believe that some of the social activism that I inherited comes from my grandmother. This is a photo of Viola Desmond's graduating class from her beauty school. That is my aunt over here standing, my Aunt Rachel standing on the far left. Um, this is a photo of my Aunt Rachel right here accepting her diploma from Viola Desmond's beauty school. There's Viola Desmond right here. When I decided to become an actor, it was very difficult in the late 70s. I was living in Montreal at the time, and when Black actors would turn up for auditions for either a commercial or a television show, we were told point blank that, when without a hesitation, that the producers were not hiring any Blacks. Back then, it was quite blatant. Today, it's against the law to do such a thing. But back then, in the late 70s, there was open racism in the television and film industry. All I wanted to do is become an actor. But because of the situation at the time in the 1970s, I was forced to become a social activist. I didn't like what was going on in the television and film industry. So I formed this group of Black actors and performers called the Montreal Black Performance Association. And we lobbied the television and advertising industry in Canada to be more inclusive in their hiring and have a greater representation of visible minorities. For my actions, I was blacklisted in the industry. Could not get a job for over 2 years. However, I stuck to my guns, and our association kept up its action against the industry, and we eventually convinced the industry to include visible minorities in their hiring practices. One of the first television series roles I got was an American television series called Airwolf. And I was very fortunate to get that role in that American television series. At the time, Airwolf was one of the most expensive television series produced on television. It was $1 million an episode. Today, that is peanuts. Some Hollywood actors make $1 million an episode. But back then, it was a very expensive television series to produce because of all the aerial shots of the helicopter and all the aerial footage that they had to take. So I was very fortunate to land one of the lead roles in that episode, and I was very fortunate to realize that my activism as a social activist trying to promote greater diversity in the industry eventually didn't affect my career. In fact, I think it brought a great deal of pride and respect for me as an artist. Most Canadians know me from my CBC television series Street Legal, which was on the CBC television for about 5 years. I was involved in the series for 5 years. The series won a couple of awards. In the series, I eventually had a romantic relationship with the female star, Sonia Smits, who is white. And eventually we got married on the series. And it was the first interracial relationship on primetime television in a continuing series in North America. So I was very proud to be associated with that television series, Street Legal. After enjoying a lucrative acting career, I decided to become a documentary filmmaker. And one of the first films that I produced was a film called Honor Before Glory. This is a poster from the McCord Museum in Montreal that showed my film. Honor Before Glory was the story of Canada's one and only all-Black military battalion that was formed during the First World War. And when the First World War broke out, Black Canadian men tried to enlist, but they were refused simply based on the color of their skin. And so there was a great push from the Black communities across Canada to force the Canadian government to accept Blacks into the Canadian Army during the First World War. And they eventually succeeded. And I was able to obtain the war diary of my great uncle, William Andrew White, who was the chaplain for this all-Black battalion. Reverend William Andrew White was a Baptist minister in Halifax, and he actually was played a pivotal role in spearheading the movement to force the Canadian government to accept Blacks into the Canadian Army. And he went overseas with this all-Black battalion as their chaplain. And when he got there, he saw what was happening and decided to write a diary. And his son, Lorne White, who's my cousin, gave me a copy of his father's diary. And when I read it, it completely blew me away, because my great uncle wrote everything that he saw, what was happening to those Black soldiers, and decided to write it down in a diary. And when I read the diary, I knew that I had to make a film about this story based on my great uncle's diary. And the film has been shown all across North America and even in Europe, has won several awards. And I'm so happy that I played a role in telling my great uncle's story and giving recognition and tribute to this amazing all-Black battalion that was neglected in Canadian history books. As a matter of fact, this year, the Canadian government has announced that they will be making an official apology to the all-Black battalion, the number 2 Construction Battalion. And that apology will be given by the Government of Canada on July 9th of this year. So this was a big year for my film, even though my film was produced several years ago. This was a big year for my film. And I'm glad that the Government of Canada has decided to issue this apology, even though it's coming more than 100 years later. I also serve on the National Advisory Committee to the Government of Canada for their official apology. And for the past several months, I've been working with the Government of Canada in formulating how that apology should take place and how it should happen. And so finally, it has been decided that the Government of Canada, probably the Minister of Defense, will make that apology on July 9th. And I couldn't be more happy about that. As mentioned, my great uncle, Reverend William Andrew White, he was the chaplain of the number 2 Construction Battalion. He was a Baptist minister for a church in Halifax called the Cornwallis Street Baptist Church. And he was the first Black minister to have his sermons broadcast across Canada and parts of the northern United States. He was also, while he was serving as chaplain for the Black Battalion, he was the only Black chaplain in the entire British Armed Forces during the First World War. He was also one of the few commissioned Black officers in the entire British Armed Forces during the First World War. He was also the first Black Canadian to receive an honorary doctorate degree from a university. An amazing man, and I'm proud I was able to tell his story. One of Reverend William Andrew White's children was Portia White, who was Canada's first famous Black classical singer. And growing up, my mother would brag about her cousin Portia, who garnered international fame traveling around the world performing as a talented classical singer. And I was very happy to hear that Portia has been recognized in Nova Scotia with various awards and scholarships named in her behalf. As a matter of fact, the Canada Post issued a stamp back in the 1990s commemorating the life and career of my Aunt Portia White. So we're very proud of the accomplishments of my cousin Portia White. In 2016, which was the 100th anniversary of the formation of the No. 2 Construction Battalion, and in commemoration and recognition of that 100th anniversary of this Black Battalion, I wrote, directed, and produced a play based on an incident from my great uncle's war diary. And that play was called The Color of Courage. And it had its world premiere in Nova Scotia and was attended very well. And I was happy that I was able to make another story about this historic all Black Canadian battalion. And it was a great joy for me to produce the story again on stage as well as on film. This is a publicity shot from the play, The Color of Courage, with some of the actors. This is a photo of me with some of the actors. In 2018, which was the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, 2018, and in September of 2018, I received an invitation from the government of France to come to France to attend a special ceremony where they were actually honoring the Black Canadian soldiers who died in France. So I was actually thrilled to have been given this invitation to come to France and to be able to walk on the same ground and in the same places that my great uncle did over 100 years ago. In this photo, I actually visited some of the graves of some of the Black Canadian soldiers who died in France. While I was there in France, they unveiled a special monument that was erected for these Black Canadian soldiers who died in France, and the names of those soldiers are written on the monument. Many of the names I recognized because there were names that were revealed in my great uncle's diary. And so what had happened to those Black soldiers was written in my great uncle's diary, and I knew how they perished and how they died. And so to see their names on that monument was very emotional for me. It was a very emotional and spiritual journey for me to begin with, to be able to walk on the same grounds as those Black soldiers. You'll see in the background of this monument is a forest. This is actually where the Black Canadian soldiers from the #2 Construction Battalion worked. As a construction battalion, they were a labor military unit that was assigned to the Forestry Corps. And that's what's written on this monument, the Canadian Forestry Corps. And their job was to go into the forest, cut trees, and build huts, dig trenches, lay barbed wire, but mainly to work in the forest cutting trees for the sawmills. And they worked night and day. They were worked in all kinds of inclement weather. And when they got sick, some of the white doctors refused to take care of them. They suffered a great deal of cruel and inhumane racism. And that's why I am so happy that the government of France erected this monument in their memory and honor, and so happy that the government of Canada is issuing a formal apology. This is a photo of me of some of the actors who were in France who were part of the ceremony. It was a pleasure to meet them and to be part of that ceremony. I should also mention that just this March, last month, I was invited to the Barbados Independent Film Festival to present my film, Honor Before Glory, about the All Black Battalion. And one of the reasons why I was invited to Barbados to open their film festival with this film was just recently I discovered that there were actually 42 men from Barbados who were part of this historic battalion. When the battalion was being formed by the Canadian government was afraid that they wouldn't find enough Black men from Canada to form a full battalion of 700 men. And so what they did was they also recruited from the United States and the Caribbean. There were over 167 African Americans who were part of that Canadian All Black Battalion. The battalion was about 700 members strong. Also, they recruited from the Caribbean, and Barbados represented the largest number of men from the Caribbean, 42 men, more than any other island. So that was one of the reasons why my film was presented at the Barbados Independent Film Festival this year, and because of the publicity of the official apology being given by the Government of Canada. This is a photo of the hotel where I stayed at when I was in France for that ceremony. And I show you this photo of this hotel because after my trip to France and after walking on the same grounds as these Black soldiers, when I got back home, I was so inspired by my trip that I decided to read my great uncle's diary again. And when I read the diary, I realized that my great uncle stayed at the very same hotel I stayed at in Arbois, France. And I often wondered if I stayed in the same hotel room as he did. But that was something to discover when I came back home from France, that I'd actually stayed in the same hotel. While I was in France, I met a family. This woman that's in the photo, her son wanted to find out who his great-grandfather was. And she told me that her great-grandmother or her grandmother was had a relationship with a Black Canadian soldier from the First World War. And they never knew his name. And her son wanted to find out who this man was that he was related to. And so this woman contacted me about several years ago. I don't know how she found me. She wrote to me from France. She only spoke French. And luckily, I speak French growing up in Montreal. And she asked me if I would help find this elusive Black Canadian soldier who was a part of their family. And I asked her, what does she know about him? She didn't have a name. She said the only thing that she remembered was that he played a saxophone in one of the Black Battalion bands. And as fate would have it, I had a photo of the band that was formed in the Black Battalion. And in this photo, there's a photo of a gentleman holding a tuba, and his son was interviewed for my film. So I approached his son, whom I interviewed for the film, and asked him about this photograph that he gave me and who was the gentleman sitting down, kneeling with the saxophone, if he happened to know who he was. And his son, the son of the tuba player, said, "Sure, I know who that is. That's a gentleman who lived upstairs to us in St. John's, New Brunswick." And as it turned out, this gentleman was indeed the man that that this family in France was looking for. So I was able to pass on his name and his family history to them. That son who was looking for his elusive great-grandfather has now become very close friends with me. And every time he's in Toronto, we get together and we visit. And for me, this is one of the greatest rewards from the film. The film has touched so many lives. It's won so many awards across North America. But the biggest reward for me is its ability to touch people's lives. No matter where I go to present the film, inevitably, after showing the film, someone comes up to me and says, "You know, I saw my grandfather in that film," or "I saw my great uncle in that film, and I didn't know he was a part of that battalion." And so many people have reached out to me discovering that they had a relative in this Black Battalion film. I'm just overjoyed that the film has been able to reach out and touch people's lives. And this is one gentleman that the film has been able to reach out and touch. I've produced many films, some around the world. I've gone to Africa to produce films, as mentioned, on the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Africa, the global crisis of landmines in Cambodia and in Bosnia. And it's been an honor for me to produce films that draw awareness to important global issues, as well as films that touch upon some important African Canadian history. As part of my activism, I was approached by the government of Canada in the early 1990s to be the national co-chairman of the March 21 campaign for the federal government. And March 21 is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And it is in recognition of the tragic events in Soweto, South Africa, where so many Black South Africans were killed simply for demonstrating for equal rights. And it happened on March 21st, 1960. And since then, that's how the March 21 event, International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, was formed. And as part of the federal government's March 21 campaign, I was responsible for developing programs and helping with designing events. I also was instrumental in designing the logo or the symbol for the March 21, which is a handprint being raised in the air, meaning stop it, stop racism. I was part of that design of that campaign for the federal government. In 1998, the March 21 campaign of the federal government I helped them organize an event in Vancouver in 1998 for a large ceremony that invited Prince Charles and the royal family as special guests. And in this photo, Prince Charles, looking much younger, is putting on a rubber glove, about to place it in some paint and place his handprint on a canvas as part of the ceremony of the special celebrities who've put their handprint in recognition of March 21. I was very pleased that he was very cooperative and jovial. He had a wonderful sense of humor and was very eager and willing to participate as part of the ceremonies. I went to South Africa in 2015 as part of the March 21 campaign. I visited Nelson Mandela's house, where he grew up in Soweto. It was important for me to visit his home while I was in South Africa. I received a letter from Nelson Mandela for my efforts working with the federal government on the March 21 campaign. I cherish this plaque from him commemorating my efforts in working with the March 21 campaign. My involvement in community service and social activism continued. Here, I was co-hosting Canada Day on Parliament Hill for the Prime Minister's office. The Prime Minister then was Jean Chrétien. I co-hosted the event with Julie Payette, the former Governor General of Canada. Then she was a famous Canadian astronaut and was before she became Governor General of Canada. That's a nutshell of my work as an artist and as a social activist. And I'm very proud of my career and very grateful that I've been given the opportunity to get involved in so many important initiatives and so many important films. God has blessed me with giving me the opportunity to be able to use my skill and my talent and give me the opportunities to create these important projects. And that's my life in a 40-minute segment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That was fantastic. I had so many moments of wow when you were presenting. So especially when you reconnected the family who wanted to know the saxophone player. I mean, that's absolutely amazing. We'll open it up to questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the comment section. But I wanted to begin with, it's kind of a two-part question. It's about the number 2 Construction Battalion. And just, I want your thoughts on why you you think more people aren't aware of the number 2 Construction Battalion and their efforts and sacrifice. But also, I was wondering your thoughts on why some descendants of the number 2 Construction Battalion, why they aren't aware that their ancestors fought in this battalion.
Okay, good question. First of all, like many men, like many Canadian men who came back from the war, they never talked about it with their families. They never talked about it. And so that's why some of the families didn't know what was going on. But as time went by, families lost touch with some of the memorabilia that some of these soldiers had. So their grandchildren today may not have known that uh, their grandfather or their great uncle served in this battalion. And it's unfortunate because they played such an important role in that unique historic battalion. Why people don't know too much about this battalion? Um, First of all, the Canadian government, it was an embarrassment for them. It represented a dark chapter in Canadian history. There were attempts to sweep that history under the rug and keep it hidden because it was an embarrassment. And so when I pitched the film project Honor Before Glory, I received some resistance at the beginning from certain government agencies who really didn't want the story to come out because it was such an embarrassment. But I impressed upon them that it wasn't my intent to embarrass anybody. It was my intent to show that Black Canadian men were so eager to fight for the country that they loved, and that Black Canadian men fought, bled, and died for their country during the First World War. And they did it with great respect for their country. And that's the message that I wanted to get across. And luckily, that message was received, and the project was well supported by a number of government agencies.
Excellent. So we have a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on the apology? What do you think needs to be a part of it?
Well, first of all, a sincere remorse and sorrow on behalf of the government of Canada for their actions of the past. It seems like the government of Canada is making quite a bit of apologies these days, and rightfully so. You know, at least they are recognizing the wrongs that were committed in the past in this country and perpetrated on behalf of the government of Canada. And so I think that the apology needs to be sincere. It would also be great if the apology included a commitment by the government to continue the legacy and education of this important part of Canadian history. In other words, I think it's important that the government put some money behind the apology to help with the legacy of the number 2 Construction Battalion. And that's what I hope for the apology.
Okay, we have another comment. There is now a database where you can search all of the names of men who served in the number 2 Construction Battalion. Yes, you're absolutely right. I don't know if you wanted to speak to that as well, but I did have a question that kind of goes along with that as well. Do you know of any efforts that are being made to try and help descendants connect to that history, to find out that their ancestors did fight?
Absolutely. Because I serve on the National Advisory Committee to the Government of Canada's official apology, we have been organizing and formulating various ways for descendants to find out more about their relatives who served in the number 2 Construction Battalion. So part of that program is a website where descendants can actually log on to and find out more about their relatives and declare that they are a descendant of one of the soldiers from the #2 Construction Battalion. Um, there's also there's also a website um, formed by the Black Cultural Center of Nova Scotia that contains the list of names of all the soldiers who were part of the #2 Construction Battalion and where they were from. So if you feel that you may have had a relative who was a part of this historic battalion, you can log on to the Black Cultural Center of Nova Scotia's website and log on to the #2 Construction Battalion um, tab of that website and find out the names of all the soldiers. So we've been doing a great deal of work in the past 9 or 8 months that have been part of this committee, special committee, in terms of organizing the special event on July 9th, how that's going to shape up. There are also a number of communities across Canada that we've approached about possibly hosting a pre-apology event. I know that Amherstburg Freedom Museum is about to organize an event close to the July 9th event in Nova Scotia. I know that the Amherstburg Freedom Museum is hosting an event, as well as many other Black communities across Canada who are helping to promote this very important apology.
Amazing. I just had one final question for myself, and that leaves an opportunity for, oh, actually, you know what? Someone else just asked a question. I'll ask that one first. How would someone be able to see this movie, Honor Before Glory?
If they wanted, first of all, the film has been well distributed to schools, universities, government agencies all across North America. Because it is in such high demand, I have been reluctant to post the whole film online because the film is still our best-selling film. So if you are an educator or a simple or person who is just interested in purchasing the DVD, all they have to do is log on to my website, reach out to me, anthonysherwood.com, reach out to me, and I can send them the details of how to purchase the film.
Great. And I'll also be sharing the link to your website on our Facebook and website as well for people to reach out to you as well. So I guess I'll just ask my question. I mean, what an amazing experience being able to read your great uncle's journal. I mean, that is a rare find. So I think it's amazing that your ancestor did that and you were able to read it. I was just wondering if there was anything that really stood out in the journal, whether it was something that shocked you, surprised you, or made you really emotional. I mean, it must have been a very emotional experience reading that, reading his journal. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Thank you. First of all, that it was fate or destiny that this diary would land in my hands, a filmmaker. And the diary, before my cousin, before my great uncle gave the diary to his family after he passed away, the diary was lost for many years. And my cousin, Lauren, was walking down the streets of Halifax one day, and somebody bumped into him and he said, "Hey, Lauren, hi, how are you? I think I have your father's diary at home." And so he was able to recover it after many years of being lost. But when he gave it to me and I read it, it blew me away because being a Baptist minister, he had this wonderful command of the English language. And he had this ability to transport you back in time by painting these vivid images with these poetic and eloquent words. And he also wrote everything that he saw. that was happening to these Black soldiers. And you could feel the pain and the torment and the agony in his words just by reading his diary. And so when I finished reading the diary, I said, well, I have to tell this story. I'm a filmmaker and the diary lands in my hands. And also, I asked Lorne, his son, I said, did your dad ever write another diary? He said, no. This is the only diary he ever wrote in his life. And I asked myself, I said, well, why did he do that? I think he did that because he wanted people to know what was happening to these Black soldiers. And that's what inspired me to make the film.
Amazing. We have another comment. It's from Barb Porter, who you know, working with her. She says, thank you, Anthony, for this wonderful and enlightening presentation. We have someone who's writing or typing a comment, but if you wanted to turn on your mic. Oh, actually, they're done writing. An amazing presentation and very informative. So I see no other questions. So I think we'll leave it at that. But again, thank you so much. That was such a fantastic presentation, and so grateful for all the work that you've done and continue to do to share this history. And thank you also to the audience for joining us today. And again, I will be sharing the link to your website on our Facebook and website, along with this presentation as well for people to watch as well too. So again, thank you everyone. And again, thank you, Anthony. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And good luck with all your endeavors.
You as well.